Captain Zane Ford had always believed in rules. They were the foundation of everything he had ever known: discipline, order, control. But now, as he stood on the command deck of the Earth military cruiser Endurance, staring out at the vastness of space, he felt a gnawing unease he couldn't shake. He had followed orders his entire life, but now, an order had arrived that made him question everything. The alien forces, the Xerians, had always been clear about their approach to war. Efficiency was key. No sentiment, no hesitation. Victory at any cost. But humanity, for all its flaws, had always held on to something deeper. Something more human. Morality. Integrity. Zane had never expected to have to choose between them. Captain Ford, a voice crackled through his earpiece. It was Commander Lyra, a Xerian officer who had overseen Earth's military cooperation with their galactic allies. Your orders have been transmitted. Execute the strike on the civilian colony, as directed. All defenses must be neutralized. Zane's heart sank. A civilian colony. He had fought in battles, seen enemies fall, and lost comrades, but never had he been asked to target innocent lives. Not even the Xerians, with all their cold, calculating logic, would allow such an atrocity, right? Commander, he said, his voice steady, though his hands clenched around the control panel, are you certain about this order? We have intelligence reports that suggest no military targets are present on that world. There was a brief silence before Lyra's response came through, colder than he had ever heard. The Xerian High Command has made their decision. The colony is to be wiped out. Do not question it. The finality in her tone sent a chill through Zane's bones. He was a soldier, yes, but a human soldier. He had his principles. The thought of carrying out this mission felt wrong, a betrayal of everything he had been taught. Zane stared at the screen, the map of the colony flickering in front of him. His finger hovered over the launch button, his mind a storm of conflicting thoughts. The Xerians were allies, but their way of war was far from human. This wasn't what he had signed up for. Not even in the darkest days of humanity's struggle for survival had they stooped to such depths. But he couldn't refuse. Not openly. Not without endangering everything. He had pledged his loyalty, and disobedience now would be considered treason. Then, something unexpected happened. A small signal blinked on his monitor, a hidden communication, encrypted and barely detectable. A private message. Zane quickly opened it, his eyes scanning the text. The order is a test, Ford. Do not follow it. Help us, and we will give you the power to change the course of this war. Trust no one, but trust yourself. His pulse quickened. Who was this? What were they asking of him? This wasn't an order from the Xerians. It was something else, someone else. And if Zane knew one thing, it was that he couldn't ignore it. The message disappeared from his screen before he had time to fully process it. There was no time to trace the sender, no time to think it through. Zane knew only one thing now: he couldn't go through with the mission. There was more at stake here than just the life of one colony. Captain Ford, Lyra's voice cut through the silence, you are wasting time. Execute the order now, or face the consequences. Zane's mind raced, but his decision was made. He couldn't be a part of this. Not anymore. Without a word, he turned away from the console and addressed his crew. Prepare for a change in mission parameters. We're not attacking the colony. We're going to disable the Xerian communication relay. His officers exchanged confused glances, but none of them spoke. They had trained with Zane for years, they knew how he operated, but this was different. It was unheard of. Before anyone could object, the ship's comm system buzzed with an incoming transmission. A new, coded signal. This one, Zane knew, was from the mysterious figure who had sent the message. The transmission was clear: follow the plan, Captain. We'll handle the rest. He didn't understand it, but he didn't have time to question it. Zane keyed in the coordinates for the relay, his mind set on one goal, stopping the massacre. But as the Endurance turned toward the new objective, a deep voice echoed through the command deck. "Captain, you're making a dangerous choice." Zane spun around. It was Lieutenant Barris, his second-in-command. The man had been with Zane since the beginning, through every mission, every battle. His loyalty was unquestionable, but Zane could see the fear in his eyes. "You're defying a direct order, sir," Barris continued, his voice low. "This could mean the end of everything we've fought for." Zane's eyes met Barris's, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. "I didn't ask for this war," he said quietly. "But I won't be part of something that sacrifices innocent lives. Not when we have a chance to do something better." The silence hung heavy. Barris nodded slowly, then turned back to his station. "Then I'm with you, sir. Whatever happens next." Zane's heart gave a small, reassuring flutter. At least he wasn't alone in this. But the stakes were higher than ever. If they succeeded, they could change the course of the war, perhaps save countless lives. If they failed, it could mean the end of humanity's future in the galaxy. As the Endurance sped toward the Zirian communication relay, Zane had no idea who had sent that message, or what they wanted from him. But he knew one thing for certain: the war was about to take an unexpected turn, and nothing, absolutely nothing, was going to be the same again. The tension aboard the Endurance was palpable. Captain Zane Ford stood before the ship's command deck, staring at the swirling abyss of space, his thoughts racing. The message had come at the perfect time, but its contents left him with more questions than answers. Who had sent it? Why had they contacted him specifically? Was this some kind of elaborate trap, or was it a chance for humanity to take control of its destiny? The ship's engines hummed as they moved farther from the Zirian-controlled colony. The target now was the alien communication relay, an essential piece of technology that controlled the Zirians' transmissions to the other species in the galaxy. If they disabled it, they could cripple the Zirian leadership's ability to give orders across their forces. Zane's mind was still reeling from the decision he had made. He knew what was at stake. By refusing to carry out the Zirian order, he had risked everything: the lives of his crew, the security of Earth, and perhaps even his own life. But the alternative, to follow the order and sacrifice innocent lives, was something Zane could never live with. He wasn't just a soldier, he was human. "Captain, we're approaching the relay," said Lieutenant Barris, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Zane turned to face his second-in-command. "What's our status, Lieutenant?" Barris adjusted his console, his fingers flying over the controls. "We're on course. I've already disabled the ship's transponder to prevent any unauthorized Zirian ships from detecting us. We should have about 30 minutes before they notice our deviation." Zane nodded. "Good. Stay sharp, Barris. We can't afford any mistakes." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The crew was on edge. Zane could see it in their faces. They trusted him, but they didn't fully understand why they were doing this. They had followed orders their whole lives. This was unprecedented. The ship drifted silently through space, the vastness of the void surrounding them, an eerie silence settling over the crew. Each passing minute seemed to stretch endlessly, the weight of their actions growing heavier with each tick of the clock. Zane walked to the center of the deck, his thoughts never straying far from the message. Trust no one, but trust yourself. But what did that mean? Who was this mysterious figure? And why had they chosen him? As the Endurance approached the relay, Zane could feel the weight of his decision bearing down on him more than ever. The quiet hum of the engines was the only sound as the ship edged closer to its target. If they failed, they could be wiped out in an instant. If they succeeded, they might change the fate of the galaxy. Suddenly, a sharp ping broke the silence. A message. Zane's heart skipped a beat. It was another encrypted transmission, but this one was far more urgent. You've made the right choice, Captain. But now you're in deeper than you realize. Trust no one. Trust only your instincts. There's a spy on board. Don't let them stop you. The words hit him like a slap in the face. A spy? Zane's blood ran cold. Who could it be? Barris? One of the crew members he had worked with for years? The thought of betrayal within his own ranks was unthinkable, but the message was clear. Someone was working against them, and they had to act fast. Barris, Zane said, his voice sharp. We need to secure the ship's command deck immediately. We have a traitor among us. Barris's expression hardened, and for a moment, Zane saw the same fear in his eyes that he felt in his own chest. Are you sure, sir? Could it be a mistake? We've always trusted our crew. Zane nodded grimly. I don't know who it is, but we can't take any chances. Get everyone in their stations. If we're going to do this, we need to be prepared for anything. As Barris moved to carry out his orders, Zane walked to the communication station. He sent a silent prayer into the void. Please, let this work. Let us be right. The Endurance closed in on the relay, now only moments away. The ship was running dark, no communications going in or out. The alien station loomed ahead like a silent sentinel, its massive structure floating in space, an intimidating fortress. Captain, Barris's voice came over the comms, we've secured the crew. Everyone's at their posts. But there's something strange. Zane's heart raced. What do you mean, strange? I've just intercepted a transmission from our own crew to the Zirians, Barris replied. Someone's been communicating with them. Zane's stomach churned. It was worse than he had feared. The traitor wasn't just trying to sabotage the mission, they were already working with the enemy. Who is it? Zane demanded. Barris paused, his voice tight. It's Lieutenant Harlan. He's been sending encrypted messages to the Zirians. I didn't catch all of it, but it's clear he's been coordinating with them. Zane's fists clenched. He couldn't believe it. Harlan had been one of his most trusted officers. They had fought side by side through some of the toughest battles. But now, it seemed, he was working against them. Against humanity. We'll deal with him later, Zane said, his voice cold. Right now, we have a mission to finish. Barris, get ready to disable the relay. I'll handle Harlan. As Zane moved toward the lower levels of the ship to confront the traitor, his mind was filled with conflicting thoughts. Betrayal was the last thing he had expected, but here it was, staring him in the face. His instincts told him that Harlan had been compromised by the Zirians, but why? What was it that had turned him against them? As he descended the corridors, Zane couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The stakes were higher now. There were no more simple choices, no more rules to follow. This was war, in its rawest and most unforgiving form. He reached the storage bay where Harlan was supposed to be stationed, the door sliding open with a hiss. Zane's breath caught in his throat when he saw the figure standing in front of the control panel, a blaster in hand. Zane, Harlan said, his voice laced with bitter regret. You don't know what you're getting into. You don't know who's really in charge. Zane's hand went to his own weapon. I know enough, he replied. You're a traitor, Harlan. And I'm going to stop you. But as he took a step forward, Harlan's eyes flickered with a strange intensity. You don't understand. I didn't have a choice. I was promised something more than this. I was promised power. Zane's heart sank. Harlan wasn't just a traitor, he was a pawn. A victim of something far greater. But Zane had no time for questions. The relay had to be disabled. And Harlan had to be stopped. The atmosphere on the Endurance was tense, every crew member acutely aware of the danger they were in. Captain Zane Ford had just confronted Lieutenant Harlan, and though Zane had managed to neutralize the immediate threat, the consequences of their actions were now more profound than ever. A spy had infiltrated their ranks, and this wasn't just a betrayal of their mission, it was a betrayal of humanity's very chance at survival in this intergalactic war. Zane's hands shook as he stood over Harlan, his former ally now incapacitated and tied up in a secure holding cell. The betrayal cut deeper than any battle wound he had ever endured. He had trusted Harlan, confided in him. Now, all of that felt like a lie. "I don't understand," Zane murmured to himself as he stared at the cell. "Why did you do it, Harlan? What did they promise you?" But there was no answer. Harlan had been under some kind of influence, that much was clear. It wasn't just greed or ambition. Someone had manipulated him, twisted him into a tool for something far greater than his understanding. The thought gnawed at Zane. Who was behind this conspiracy? Was it the Xerians, trying to weaken humanity from the inside? Or was there something even more sinister at play? Zane pulled himself from his thoughts as Barris entered the holding room, his face grim. "Captain, we've intercepted more transmissions. The Xerians are on high alert. They know we've deviated from the original mission. We're running out of time." Zane's stomach tightened. The stakes were higher now. Not only had they just crippled their own plans by taking out Harlan, but now the alien forces were closing in on them. They had no choice but to push forward, there was no turning back. "We have to disable that relay," Zane said, his voice firm. "Barris, prepare the crew. We'll hit the relay before the Xerians can mobilize." As Barris left to execute the orders, Zane stood in the command deck, looking out at the black void of space. The Xerian relay was within reach, only a few hundred miles away. But now, there was more to the mission than just disabling the relay. It had become a symbol. A stand against an oppressive alien force that threatened to destroy humanity's identity. Zane knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be no clean victories, no neat resolutions. He could already hear the thrum of alien ships closing in on them. The Xerians were ruthless, and if they caught wind of the human rebellion, they wouldn't hesitate to wipe them out. "We're not backing down," Zane whispered, more to himself than anyone else. A day to remember. The rebellion, in its essence, wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for humanity's spirit. What had started as a military conflict over resources and territory had now turned into a battle for the soul of humankind. The Xerians were calculating, methodical, and unyielding. They saw humanity as an unpredictable force, and that unpredictability was dangerous to them. It was why they feared humanity's potential, why they saw fit to test Earth's resolve by putting them in impossible situations. But Zane believed something different. He believed that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their tactics or their weaponry, but in their ability to connect with one another, to hold on to what mattered most, family, love, and loyalty. He saw it in the faces of the men and women who stood by him, who risked everything to take down an empire that seemed untouchable. As the Endurance neared the Xerian relay station, the crew prepared for the final push. The plan was simple: disable the relay, initiate a temporary blackout in the Xerian network, and escape before reinforcements could arrive. But even as the mission seemed clear, Zane couldn't shake the feeling that there was more at play here, something he still didn't fully understand. The ship's engines hummed quietly as they aligned for their approach. Zane stood at the command center, his hands steady as he monitored the operation. There was no time for second-guessing now. They had come too far. "Captain," Barris's voice came through the comms, "we're in position. It's time." Zane nodded, his expression hardening. "Do it. Disable the relay. The first strike." As the Endurance released a salvo of ion missiles designed to disable the relay's power grid, Zane held his breath. For a moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. The ship rocked slightly as the missiles made contact, a brilliant flash of light lighting up the dark expanse of space. The relay station's signals flickered, then went dark, a promising sign that they had succeeded. But no sooner had the relay gone silent than a fleet of Zirian warships emerged from the shadows. They had been waiting. "Captain!" Barris shouted through the comms, "We've got company. A full fleet is closing in." Zane's heart raced. He knew they didn't have the firepower to fight off a full fleet of Zirian warships. They had one chance: escape. "Prepare the hyperdrive," Zane ordered, his voice sharp and commanding. "We need to get out of here, now." But just as they attempted to initiate the jump to hyperspace, a blast from one of the alien ships rocked the Endurance, sending it careening off course. The ship's systems flickered, the engine sputtering in protest as alarms blared across the command deck. "We've lost engine power," Barris called. "We're stuck." Zane's mind raced. They were trapped in the middle of enemy space, with no way to escape. The fleet was closing in fast, and the Zirians weren't going to give them mercy. But just then, Zane remembered the secret transmission, the one that had warned him about a spy on board. Perhaps this wasn't the end. Perhaps there was still hope. "Barris," Zane said, a new resolve in his voice. "It's not over. We're not alone in this fight. Prepare to make another move. We've got one more card to play. The rebels' secret." It was in that moment, amid the chaos, that the truth finally hit Zane. The rebellion he had been thrust into wasn't just about humanity. It was about the larger, hidden conflict within the galaxy, one that involved more than just the Zirians. There were forces at play that no one had anticipated. And now, with the relay disabled and the Zirians closing in, the fight was just beginning. Zane had set the stage for something far greater than he had ever imagined. The Endurance shook violently as the Zirian warships unleashed another barrage. The ship's hull creaked under the pressure, and the lights flickered, casting long shadows across the command deck. The crew was in a state of controlled chaos, but Captain Zane Ford remained steadfast. This was far from over. They were outnumbered, yes, but they had one advantage the Zirians didn't: humanity's will to survive. "Captain, the engines are failing," Barris reported, his voice tight with urgency. "We're losing power. The Zirians will be on top of us in minutes." Zane didn't flinch. He was used to moments like these. But something felt different this time. The stakes were higher, and the clock was ticking. They had to find a way out, and fast. The relay station had been disabled, but the Zirians were nothing if not persistent. If they couldn't escape, they'd have to fight their way through. He turned to Barris. "Get to the secondary control room. Try to reroute the power to the engines. We need something to give us an edge." As Barris hurried off, Zane's mind raced. The Zirians weren't just after the relay, they had to know that there was something more going on. Their relentless pursuit wasn't just to regain control over their communication network, it was to crush the rebellion before it could gain any more ground. And yet, Zane couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more at play here, something he still didn't understand. The traitor, Lieutenant Harlan, had been a part of something far bigger than Zane had realized. He wasn't just working for the Zirians, he had been in contact with someone else, someone who had bigger plans. The hidden enemy. Zane's thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice crackling over the comms. "Captain, it's me." "Barris," the voice sounded strained. "I've rerouted the auxiliary power to the engines, but..." "Captain, you need to hear this." Zane moved quickly, his boots echoing in the corridor as he made his way to the secondary control room. When he entered, Barris was standing in front of a console, his face pale. "What is it?" Zane asked, his voice low but firm. Barris turned, a troubled look on his face. It's Harlan. I've been going through his encrypted transmissions, trying to piece things together. And I found something that doesn't make sense. Zane raised an eyebrow. What did you find? Barris hesitated before speaking. Harlan wasn't just working with the Zirians. He was in contact with someone else. Someone human. They were planning something, but it's not what we thought. Zane's heart skipped a beat. A human traitor working against them? It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a conspiracy. Who? He demanded. Barris shook his head. I don't know. The transmission was heavily encrypted. But whoever it is, they're pulling the strings behind all of this. They're trying to manipulate the rebellion for their own gain. The realization hit Zane like a freight train. The rebellion wasn't just fighting the Zirians, it was fighting something else entirely. Someone from within their own ranks had turned against them, and now, they were stuck in a web of lies and manipulation. We can't let this go any further, Zane said, his voice hardening. We need to find out who's behind this. We need to expose them before it's too late. A sinister plot unfolds. As Barris continued to analyze the data, Zane paced the room, his mind running through the possibilities. If there was a human traitor working with the Zirians, then it wasn't just about survival anymore. The rebellion itself could be at risk. This could be the final blow. But then another thought occurred to him. What if this conspiracy went higher up than just a single officer? What if the traitor wasn't a part of the rebellion at all, but someone within the Earth government itself? Zane's gut twisted with dread. The more he thought about it, the more everything seemed to fit together. The sudden arrival of the Zirians, the manipulation of humanity's response to the war, and now, the betrayal within their ranks, it was all part of something much larger than just an intergalactic conflict. There were forces at play here that Zane couldn't begin to understand. Captain, Barris said, pulling Zane from his thoughts. I've decoded more of Harlan's transmissions. There's a name, someone we need to be wary of. Zane's heart raced. Who? Barris looked at him with wide eyes. It's Admiral Tarek. He's one of the highest-ranking officials in the Earth military. He's been in contact with the Zirians, and he's been pulling strings behind the scenes. Zane felt his stomach drop. The plot was thicker than he'd ever imagined. Tarek. A man Zane had once admired and trusted. He had always believed in the Admiral's vision of unity and strength. But now, that trust seemed misplaced. If Tarek's behind this. Zane's voice trailed off. Then we have a real problem. The rebellion, it's all been a ruse, a distraction. Barris nodded grimly. It looks like it. And if we don't act fast, we might be walking straight into a trap. Racing against time. Zane knew they had little time left. The Zirians were closing in, and the betrayal within their ranks had made the mission all the more dangerous. There was no room for hesitation anymore. Zane had always trusted his instincts, and right now, they were screaming at him to take action, before it was too late. Prepare to launch the counterattack, Zane ordered, his voice steady and commanding. We're going after Tarek. If we can stop him, we can expose the conspiracy and take control of the rebellion. But we need to do it fast. The crew moved quickly, coordinating their efforts to launch a counterattack on the Zirian fleet, all the while trying to stay one step ahead of Tarek's hidden machinations. Zane's mind raced as they prepped the ship for battle. They had to take down the alien fleet and deal with the human traitor at the same time. It was no longer just about winning the war. It was about reclaiming humanity's future. The confrontation. The Endurance and the Zirian fleet were on a direct collision course, their weapons locked and loaded. As the ship moved toward its target, Zane couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. But as they entered the fray, Zane realized something. they weren't alone in this fight anymore. The rebellion was growing. And even as their enemies closed in, Zane felt something stir deep within him, the fighting spirit of humanity. This wasn't just about war. This was about showing the galaxy that humanity would not go down without a fight. The Endurance cut through space like a knife, its engines pushing the ship to its limit as it raced toward the Xerian fleet. The crew was ready for battle, and yet Zane couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led into a trap. His mind, usually focused and steady, was clouded with doubt. They had just uncovered the conspiracy involving Admiral Tarek, an officer he had trusted implicitly. And yet, despite the growing realization that humanity's fight was much more complex than he had originally thought, there was no turning back. The Xerians were closing in fast, and they couldn't afford to waste any more time. "Captain, we're entering weapons range," Barris said, his voice steady but laced with tension. Zane nodded, his gaze locked on the holographic display in front of him. The Xerian fleet loomed large, a vast armada of sleek, deadly warships. The Xerians were cold, calculating. Fighting them was like battling an unfeeling machine. Humanity's strength, Zane knew, lay in their unpredictability. They fought with passion, with a fire that the Xerians couldn't comprehend. But passion alone wouldn't be enough to win this battle. They needed a strategy, something bold and unexpected. "Prepare to launch evasive maneuvers," Zane ordered, his voice sharp. "We're going to hit them where it hurts. Barris, lock in on their lead ship. I want to cripple their command structure." Barris moved quickly, inputting the coordinates with practiced precision. "Locked in, Captain. Weapons primed and ready." The tension was unbearable as the seconds ticked by. Zane could hear the soft hum of the ship's systems, the steady rhythm of the crew working in unison. He trusted them, every last one of them. But today, it wasn't just about the mission. Today was about showing the Xerians, and anyone else watching, that humanity wouldn't be crushed so easily. That they were willing to fight for their future, even if it meant defying orders, risking everything. "Captain," Barris said suddenly, "we've detected an incoming transmission. It's encrypted, but it's coming from Earth. It's Admiral Tarek." Zane's blood ran cold. His old mentor. The man who had once been the shining example of humanity's strength, now possibly the mastermind behind the conspiracy that threatened to undo everything they had fought for. "Tarek," Zane muttered under his breath. "He's pulling the strings." Zane motioned for Barris to play the transmission. The screen flickered before Tarek's familiar face appeared, his expression unreadable. "Captain Ford," Tarek's voice came through the speakers, calm but chilling. "I see you've decided to ignore the orders. I hope you understand the consequences of your actions. The rebellion you've joined is a mistake. You're just a pawn in a much larger game. And you won't win." The word stung, but Zane held his ground. "You're wrong, Tarek. We're not pawns. We're fighting for something bigger than orders. We're fighting for humanity's future." Tarek's expression didn't change. "You can't win this, Zane. You never understood the bigger picture. But I'll give you one last chance. Surrender now, and I'll ensure your crew's safety. Otherwise, I'll destroy everything you've worked for. You've been warned." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Zane with a heavy silence. He clenched his jaw, fighting back the rage bubbling inside him. Tarek was not just trying to crush the rebellion. He was trying to crush everything humanity stood for, its freedom, its resilience, its ability to fight for what was right, no matter the cost. Zane turned to Barris. "Prepare the ship. We're not backing down. The battle begins." Without warning, the Xerian fleet launched a volley of missiles toward the Endurance. The ship rocked violently, but Zane had anticipated the move. The crew worked with precision, adjusting their course and countering the Xerian assault with evasive maneuvers. "Activate shields." Zane shouted. "Counterattack on my mark." The Endurance twisted and turned, narrowly avoiding the incoming fire, but the Zirians were relentless. Zane knew they had to act fast. If they couldn't make a significant dent in the enemy fleet, they wouldn't make it out alive. "Now!" Zane commanded. The crew responded instantly. The ship fired back with a barrage of ion blasts, hitting one of the Zirian warships squarely in its main engines. The explosion lit up the darkness of space, a brilliant flash of light. The Zirians were momentarily stunned, but it wasn't enough to break their resolve. "We've damaged their lead ship, but they're regrouping," Barris reported. "More ships are incoming." Zane gritted his teeth. "We're not stopping here. Barris, I need a way to get behind their defenses. We have to take out their flagship." Barris nodded, eyes locked on the screen. "There's a weak spot in their formation. We can slip through their perimeter if we time it right." Zane took a deep breath. This was their shot. If they could get close enough to the Zirian flagship, they might be able to take it down, cripple the entire fleet in one fell swoop. It was risky, but it was their only chance. "Do it," Zane said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming odds. "Now." The Endurance shifted direction, cutting a sharp angle as it sped toward the Zirian flagship. The Zirians were quick to react, but Zane's instincts were sharper. He guided the ship through a flurry of enemy fire, each blast narrowly missing them as they approached the flagship. "We're in position, Captain," Barris yelled, his hands flying over the controls. "Ready to launch torpedoes." Zane's heart raced. This was it. They had one shot. "Fire!" Zane commanded. The torpedoes shot out with deadly precision, heading straight for the Zirian flagship's main reactor. The explosion was deafening, a brilliant burst of light in the black void of space. The flagship's engines flickered, its shields failing as the massive ship began to drift, helpless and crippled. The rest of the Zirian fleet hesitated, clearly shaken by the destruction of their command ship. But Zane knew that this wasn't the end. The Zirians would regroup, they always did. The rebellion had to keep pushing, keep fighting. "We've got their attention now," Zane muttered. "But it's not over. Barris, prepare to engage at full speed. We need to get to Earth and warn them about Tarak. A new threat emerges." As the Endurance pulled away from the battlefield, Zane couldn't help but feel a small sense of victory. They had taken down the flagship, crippled the Zirian fleet, but the larger war was far from over. If Admiral Tarak was still pulling strings, then their fight was only just beginning. Zane's thoughts turned back to Harlan, to the traitor who had been manipulated by forces beyond his understanding. Zane couldn't help but wonder, was it too late for him? And what about the rest of humanity? How much longer would they remain pawns in a game they didn't even know they were playing? But as the Endurance sailed toward Earth, Zane knew one thing for sure: humanity wasn't done yet. They were far from it. The rebellion had just begun. As the Endurance sailed toward Earth, Zane's mind churned with everything they had uncovered so far. The battle against the Zirians, the betrayal within their own ranks, and the revelation of Admiral Tarak's involvement in the conspiracy had shaken him to the core. Humanity's fight for survival had grown more complex than Zane had ever imagined, and now the stakes were higher than ever. It wasn't just about defeating an alien empire, it was about reclaiming the soul of humanity itself. The crew of the Endurance had just pulled off an incredible victory by crippling the Zirian flagship. But that victory was short-lived. The Zirians would regroup, they would adapt, and they would fight back harder. And with Tarak still at the helm of Earth's military, Zane knew that this was only the beginning of a far greater battle. "Captain, we're approaching Earth's atmosphere," Barris's voice broke through Zane's thoughts. He was standing at the control console, his eyes fixed on the screen. "We'll need to go through security protocols before we land." Zane nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. Earth was home, the place he had sworn to protect. But it was no longer the safe haven it once was. It was a world teetering on the brink of an abyss, a world controlled by an invisible hand, one that had betrayed its people. They needed to act quickly. If they didn't expose Admiral Tarek's treason, humanity might find itself under the control of a power that didn't care about freedom or the future. "Contact Earth Command," Zane ordered, his voice firm. "I need to speak to someone in charge. Now." Barris hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Captain. A dangerous homecoming." As the Endurance descended toward Earth's surface, Zane's thoughts were a whirlwind. He had fought in countless battles, faced down enemies, and made difficult decisions. But nothing could have prepared him for what awaited on Earth. Admiral Tarek's treachery wasn't just a betrayal of the rebellion, it was a betrayal of everything they had fought for, everything humanity had stood for. The moment the Endurance touched down on Earth, Zane ordered his crew to stay alert. There was no telling what kind of welcome they'd receive, especially after what had happened with Tarek. His influence within Earth's military was strong, and Zane couldn't trust anyone. Not now. Not with everything at stake. The doors of the hangar bay opened, and a small group of military personnel awaited them, standing at attention. Zane stepped off the ship, flanked by Barris and a few of the trusted crew members. As they approached the group, Zane's eyes scanned the faces before him. He couldn't afford to show any weakness. They had to know he was in control. "Captain Ford," a familiar voice called out from the group. Zane's heart skipped a beat as he turned to face the speaker. It was General Marlowe, a senior officer in Earth Command. Zane had worked closely with her before the war, and he had always trusted her judgment. But now, with everything that had happened, he couldn't be sure where her loyalties lay. "Marlowe," Zane greeted, his voice steady. "I need to speak with someone in charge. Immediately." She raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Of course, Captain. Follow me." The confrontation. The small group was led to a secure conference room inside Earth Command's main facility. The air was thick with tension as Zane and Barris took their seats at the table. General Marlowe stood before them, her expression unreadable. "Captain Ford," she began, "you've returned from the mission. But before we discuss anything further, I need to know what's going on. The reports from the Endurance are disturbing." Zane's gaze never wavered. "General, you need to listen to me. Admiral Tarek has been working with the Zirians. He's been manipulating the rebellion from the inside. And now he's controlling Earth's military, he's planning to betray us all." Marlowe's eyes narrowed. "That's a bold accusation, Captain. What proof do you have?" Zane leaned forward, his voice hard. "I have proof, General. Harlan, one of my officers, was working with Tarek. The Zirians didn't just see us as an enemy, they saw us as a threat to their control over the galaxy. And Tarek was helping them. You have to believe me." There was a long pause before Marlowe spoke again, her voice low. "I believe you, Captain. But there's more at play here than you understand. Tarek isn't just trying to sabotage the rebellion. He's trying to unite humanity under a single, powerful banner. A banner that will allow us to negotiate with the Zirians, to ensure our survival." Zane's heart sank. "You're saying Tarek's trying to make a deal with the enemy? You can't be serious." "I'm saying," Marlowe continued, "that the war you're fighting, the war that's been dragging on for years, it's part of a larger plan. The Zirians know that humanity is unpredictable. That's why they fear us. But what if we could use that to our advantage? What if we could offer them something they need, something that would allow us to coexist, on our terms?" Zane felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. "You want us to negotiate with the Zirians? After everything they've done? After everything they've taken from us?" Marlowe's gaze softened. "I understand your anger, Captain. But you don't know what it's like. The Xyrians have the power to wipe us out. They know our weaknesses. The only way forward is through a new kind of alliance. The ultimate decision. Zane stood up, his fists clenched. You're wrong, General. The only way forward is through humanity's strength. Through our ability to fight for what's right. We don't need to negotiate with the Xyrians. We need to fight them, to show them that we're not just some empire to be crushed. We are humanity. We will stand, no matter what. Marlowe's eyes hardened. You're risking everything, Captain. You don't know what's at stake. I know exactly what's at stake, Zane said, his voice resolute. We're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for our future. Our freedom. Zane turned away, his heart heavy with the weight of the decision that lay before him. He knew what he had to do. There was no more room for negotiation. No more room for compromise. The time for action had come. Barris, Zane said, prepare the Endurance for launch. We're going to expose Tarek for the traitor he is. And we're going to take the fight to the Xyrians once and for all. Barris nodded, his eyes filled with determination. Aye, Captain. We're with you. As Zane stepped away from the conference table, he knew the road ahead would be long and hard. The final choice had been made. It was time to end the war, not with a deal, but with a victory. For humanity. For freedom. The Endurance was ready. Zane could feel the hum of the ship's engines beneath his boots, the pulse of the power that would take them forward into the heart of danger. Earth had been their home, their safe haven, but it had become a place of uncertainty, a place where the fight for survival wasn't just against the alien invaders but against their own people, the very ones who had once stood beside them. Admiral Tarek, the man Zane had respected, trusted, and followed for years, was the mastermind behind the betrayal. Tarek's plan had been to offer humanity's future as a bargain, an alliance with the Xyrians. He had believed that by giving in, humanity would survive. But Zane knew that it wasn't about survival at any cost, it was about fighting for what was right. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity, for all its flaws, was a force to be reckoned with. As the Endurance lifted off from Earth's surface, Zane's mind was focused, the noise of the hangar fading into the background. This was the final push. No more running. No more compromises. They would confront Tarek, expose his treachery, and stop his plans for a false peace. Captain, Barris's voice broke through the silence in the command deck, his eyes focused on the starboard side. We're heading toward the coordinates you've set. We'll be in Xyrian-controlled space within hours. Zane nodded. The Xyrians had been relentless in their pursuit, and now, it seemed the human traitors who had sided with them were just as dangerous. They had to get to Tarek before he could carry out whatever twisted plan he had left. But Zane knew this would be no easy task. Tarek had the full backing of Earth's most powerful military forces, and their final confrontation would test everything Zane had ever believed in. The final showdown. The Endurance made its way across the stars, the crew working with precision, preparing for the confrontation that was coming. Tarek's forces were vast, and they would stop at nothing to ensure humanity's surrender. Zane had learned this the hard way. The betrayal within their own ranks was a bitter pill to swallow, but there was no time for regret. It was time for action. We'll hit their command center first, Zane said, standing at the helm, his gaze fixed on the view ahead. We'll disable their communications, then take out their primary defenses. Barris, you'll lead the boarding team. I'll handle the rest. Barris gave a sharp nod. Understood, Captain. We'll get in, take them down, and get out. But Zane wasn't sure it would be that easy. As they neared the heart of the Xyrian fleet, Zane could see the massive flagship, the one Tarek had been using to coordinate with the alien empire, looming ahead. His breath caught in his throat. This was the place where it would all be decided. The place where the final blow would either bring humanity to its knees or propel them into a new era of freedom.